You're listening to the No Labels, No Limits podcast with best-selling author Sarah Box, where you get the inside scoop on the steps action takers and decision makers take to align their purpose to their principles and achieve their goals in business and life. We focus on the mantra, no labels, no limits, no excuses. And now, without further ado, please welcome your commanding coach with plenty of chutzpah and heart, Sarah Box.
Hi, welcome back. This is Sarah, your host of the No Labels, No Limits podcast, a podcast all about busting through our limiting labels and beliefs and the inner dialogues that we tell ourselves that do nothing but stall us out, make us have self-doubt, and often derail our goals and dreams, which are probably closer than we think. So today's guest, I'm really excited. By the time you're listening to this, you may have already met her on a panel that we did for the 300th episode, which was a little different focus, but you will recognize her engaged and energetic personality. And if you haven't yet listened to that, let me tell you a little bit about our guest today. Her name is Alice Draper. Right now, she's in Cape Town, South Africa. I've got the edge on her. It's morning for me and evening for her. Same day, though. And Alice is a podcast publicist, and she's on a mission to make publicity easy and accessible for underrepresented women entrepreneurs at all stages of their business. That's going to tie into something we talk about in a little bit. When Alice first started building her business, though, she knew that publicity in the right places would garner her the authority she needed to position herself as a high-end copywriter. And so she started pitching magazines like Vice, Refinery 29, Huffington Post, Business Insider, and that came with an unplanned skill, the heart, the art, and I would say the art and the heart of the pitch, which is actually how she ended up pitching us and pivoting her business towards publicity. She did a really good job, I'd have to say. And when we get to that part of the interview, I'm going to share back with Alice what steps stood out for me or struck me from reading her pitch. But she's been running Hustling Writers for over 2 years. And in this time, she has secured her clients over 500 podcasts, including countless top 1% and top 0.5% podcasts. So that's a high metric. And when Alice isn't building out her publicity strategies or thinking of her new story angles, she's taking advantage of the life she's set up for herself, which is location independence. And she house sits with her partners in places like Tbilisi, Nairobi, or Cape Town, which, like I said, is where we find Alice today. I'm going to actually ask Alice to share more about a pet peeve she has and why, how she learned to overcome rejection. Think about all those pitches. Those didn't all come with yeses. And how for those of you who want to guest on a podcast, I'm going to ask her to share a couple of her proven steps for getting invitations and acceptance. So with that, let's formally welcome Alice Draper back to the No Labels, No Limits podcast, this time for a solo conversation. Hi, Alice.
Hey, Sarah, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for that wonderful and very comprehensive introduction.
Well, I want people to know
hearing
who you
myself
are.
back. I'm like, oh.
Well, I liked your pitch to the podcast. And I'm going to tell our listeners, we get a lot of people saying, hey, this would be a great guest, or I'm a great guest. And I would say that Alice paid attention and spoke to things that stood out. So Alice, which ended up being one of her pet peeves, not about us, but about what she shared with me. But oh my goodness gracious. But Alice, let's just jump right in, and I'm going to share a quote with our audience, and then I want you to talk about why that's a pet peeve for you. So you sent me this quote from a previous podcast guest, and this was, if you haven't hit 6 figures in the first year, you're failing and then comparing. So that was one of the things that a previous guest, Joy Bantra, said was an issue for folks. And you said that was such a great episode and a pet peeve for you. Why is that, Alice?
Well, I mean, we had a pre-conversation on this, and I think that we often find ourselves unknowingly attaching our goals to obscure metrics. And the six figures just totally hit home for me because I know when I started my business, that was the buzzword. That was the word that kind of everyone was talking about. And so I kind of found myself working towards that. And when I hit my first 6-figure month, I was working like 16-hour days. I felt like everything was all over the place, not streamlined at all. We totally took on too much work, said yes to too many things. And like, when I kind of sat back from that, I was like, that's not what I want my business to look like. That's not what makes me happy. And 6 figures was a completely obscure metric for me at the time. I didn't need that much money coming into the business, especially because I was like, I think a couple of months in. And so, yeah, I think it applies to so many things, but when we're just setting a goal, and not that there is anything wrong with 6 figures, and I've heard entrepreneurs and freelancers talk about why 6 figures is a necessity every month. And that's because like they're paying off student debt and paying off certain things. And if you're scaling your business and you're scaling your impact, and the money sort of needs to represent that impact that you're making, then that makes sense. But if you're just kind of setting these obscure goals that are set for you almost by other people, because this is what other business owners aim for, and therefore you are, that may not be the right thing for you to focus on. And it can be disheartening when you don't hit it, or you can hit it and be like, oh, actually, maybe this isn't everything I wanted. So I think it needs to be kind of anchored in our own personal kind of values and what we're hoping to feel and achieve and what difference we're hoping to make, or a lifestyle you want to live, like paying off debt or having a bigger house or being able to travel. But yeah, I think that's definitely a pet peeve, is just sort of setting these goals without having any real anchor onto why you're setting those goals.
So let me come back then and think, before you started Hustling Writers and you had this vision of starting Hustling Writers, did you have a sense of what success for you would look like at that point?
That's a good question. So my vision was stability early on. I didn't have the mission of making publicity easy and accessible. And that was kind of an important thing for me to find when I realized that money wasn't motivating me anymore. You need to have something else to anchor it in. But early on, money was a motivation and stability was a motivation. So my vision was, I want 3 anchor clients who I have every month, who pay me a certain amount of money. And because I was freelancing with like a lot of sort of one-off assignments or journalism assignments, and like publications can take 3 months to pay you, so you couldn't really rely on that to pay your rent. You don't know when, like, it's a wait for it to be published and then you invoice. So my vision was, I want 3 anchor clients who are paying me every month, and I achieved that, and then I kind of started working towards money, but I had no real reasoning, and I think I needed to do some inner work and kind of figure out, okay, what impact do I want to make? What kind of business do I want to grow? I don't think that just setting a goal of money was, enough to kind of keep it going.
So, well, and that's a thing about, like, if it doesn't resonate with you, when you said to keep it going, right? It's hard to keep going when you don't feel personally invested. And so stability and finances are not a wrong reason at all. Right? That's a reason a lot of people start businesses. I need some stability. I want to be able to count on something, but they're not enough of a reason when you're really grinding it out to go, this is worth it, right? Because as you pointed out, you were ending up doing these 16-hour days, and what's left of Alice at the end of 16 hours? You got to go to bed, so you can get up and grind some more, right? And I can't help but think that a little bit of you diminishes over time because you're not fully rested. Your ideas aren't fully fresh again, right? You haven't been able to step away because you've got to keep pushing. Did you experience any of that?
Yeah, because I mean, as a business owner, and I'm sure you can relate to this, like the joy is like kind of your innovation, the way you kind of adapt strategies, ideas, implement them, the impact you're making, brainstorming new ways to create impact. And if you're stuck in what one of my clients described as a delivery trap, which is where you are just focused on meeting the demands of your clients, you can't really think about the things that make you really excited about your business. There is something great about meeting your clients' demands, but not when that's all you're doing. And that's you just kind of, you can't even think big picture what strategies would help improve the ROI here, or the return on investment, or what creative ideas can I come up with, or how can I think out of the box? And I think if at least for me, but I think for many people, if you kind of continue on that train of just being in that delivery trap, working really long hours, just delivering your clients' demands, it's going to affect the sustainability of the business, like not even just affect you, but kind of how do you sustainably grow your business when you're being burnt to the bone.
Well, and you talked about the fun of innovation, and that I can absolutely relate to that. I'm doing a project. It's a new area for me to be working in. So my co-partner in the project, super experienced. I know the business side of the project really well, and I can communicate in both languages, right? Client, and I'm learning his language, which is really fun because when I was little, I wanted to be like an interpreter. So I'm thinking, well, it's still English, but it's concepts, right? From one profession to another. And I could see the gap. I'm going, they need it to look like this because they live in this world, right? So yesterday, I just sent over a thing. I said, would it be okay with you if I took your production and I put it into a playbook, because I knew it would help the client. I sent it back and he goes, this is great. And I'm thinking, because I did it to help me, because I think like them and I'm learning to think like you. And I'm going, that was fun, but I had time to do that. I thought I've got an hour, I can do this, send it back. Would we use it? But you're right. It's like, how could I improve the ROI for that particular group and the one after them and the one after them? But if it had been in that constant, okay, I've got to do this, I have to edit, blah, 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 I wouldn't have had the time. I've been focused on only getting it out the door. And so I think you're so right in that. So how did you make that shift though? Did you have help or coaching, or did you do anything to rethink it? Or was it more introspective on your part?
I love that you spoke about your example as well. So I think it speaks to it as well. And I think I have an advantage, which is that I work with coaches. Like I do the PR for coaches. So I have a lot of their philosophies and ideas and kind of, the stuff they create in my head where I'm like, okay, this isn't working. I need to free up some space. And so I'm lucky I have a team. So I have help with research, with sending out emails and with writing pitches. I have a team of 3 contractors. And what kind of derailed me that month is that I said yes to ad hoc projects from clients. So there is podcast publicity and there's some publication publicity. And 2 clients wanted help with sponsorship pitches and guest pitches. And I just realized like one sponsorship pitch is totally out of my wheelhouse and it's a whole new thing. And I shouldn't have said yes because I couldn't get the same results because I hadn't done the research and I didn't even have time to do the research. So that month definitely taught me kind of don't say no. I mean, don't say yes to things unless they really excite you. And this is something you think you can learn. And, obviously I was honest with the client. I said to her, I hadn't done this before, but she kind of assumed, well, you pitch and it's the same thing and you'll get the same results. And so that was really stressful. So I think my takeaway was like, don't say yes to new things unless they really light you up, and also like really manage expectations. And I think the second thing was, just kind of capping my growth so that I feel like I'm coming from a place of like lots of resources and not from scarcity of resources. And so I've been very intentional about, not not bringing on lots of clients when I feel like I kind of understood like this is a comfortable number of clients, and maybe there's other ways I can grow, other ways I can serve clients. So I think those are the big kind of things. And I didn't have any coaching, but I guess I had some indirect coaching.
Well, we do learn from our environment and from things we listen to and books we read and all of that. I just didn't know if someone said, Alice, let's get you squared up here. But one more thing on that topic before we go, what was your biggest takeaway? Like if someone was going to start a business and they're the Alice of 2 years ago, and you were, and your friends, they've given you permission to share your experience. You're not just steamrolling them. What would be one thing you'd say, hey, I just would like to offer you this piece of suggestion before you get going? What would that be?
To myself 2 years ago?
To you, or to someone who came to you and said, I love what you did over the last few years. I want to do something similar. What would you tell me?
That's a good question. I would say, don't be afraid of leaning into change and unknown. And this is a tricky one. So say like, don't be afraid of investing in your business in the sense of like kind of group coaching. But like I work in the coaching space, and I think that there are a lot of wrong decisions people can make when it comes to investing in coaches. Not every program is a fit, not every coach is a fit. And there are a lot of coaches who may not be very good at what they do because it's an unregulated space. So like, be discerning, do your research, speak to past clients, make sure that this is a coach who can help you and not one who's kind of teaching you to teach other people what they do. So just be discerning, do your research, but don't be afraid to invest in your business, because I think it's funny, like I work with coaches, but I think I was afraid to invest in my business. And I was, it's not, I think it's good to be stable, but I kind of looked at the end of last year, December, and this is different, like off topic to what we were speaking about earlier. But when I looked back towards the end of last year, I kind of felt like 2022 was a fairly stagnant year for me. Nothing changed dramatically from 2021. And I realized this year, having worked with the coach and kind of building out my new offer, is that I need accountability, I need support, and I need smart people telling me, kind of directing me to the right place. And also kind of holding your hand to take a risk, because changing your business is a risk. It doesn't feel too risky in the beginning if you are not risking a lot, like a really successful career. And I wasn't risking a lot. I was coming in as a freelancer. And so starting a business didn't feel risky because no one knows about it. And if your idea flops, who cares? But when you've been in business for a while, pivoting your business or adding new offers or changing things up feels like a huge risk, because what if everyone thinks that's stupid? And like, why are you doing things differently to how you've always done them? So I think community and coaching and smart people just held my hand and say, actually, this is a good idea and you should go forward, go through with it. And that's where you grow and you innovate. I think if I could go back in time, I would be like, don't be scared to make investments, but also be discerning. Don't just throw your money anywhere. I think that's what I
second both of those. Because there's a whole tendency to want to be really frugal. And then people say, well, why don't you have someone, I don't know if I can afford that. And I'm thinking, maybe the question is, I'm not sure I can't afford that, right? Like it's a must do.
Exactly.
But once you
can lose a lot of money.
There's like one, why would I do? So that's one of the questions I ask myself. How can this task or this project be made better and easy and easier for the client and easier for our team? And oftentimes that means outsourcing, even a tiny piece of it, right? Or getting an expert in for 35, 50 minutes to say, hey, just tweak it here. You got it, But it's that fear of like wanting to be the person, or the desire rather, like, it all. We don't. Truth be told, no one does. And now we're so connected, it's easy to reach out to people and say, can I ask a question? Can I pay you? I just did that this week. I saw someone in one of my groups. the shared, peer group.
Yeah.
And she posted something. I went, oh my God, I would love to be able to have that because I'm doing a workshop on that topic and I'm getting ready to do all my materials, right? So I texted her, I said, could I have the editable, would you be open? Because she said this is just a beta for her. And I said, would you be open to sharing an editable version of that with me? That's not easy to say, Alice. And I'm happy to pay you for it. But when we modify it, I'm also happy to give that back to you so you can further edit however you want, no restriction. And she goes, no, here you can have it. And if you feel like compensating me something, that's great. Well, of course, I compensated her because she's starting a business. I'm thinking every entrepreneur needs support.
Yeah, needs some comment.
Well, she did great work. And I'm going, cool, now I can modify, I can add in things, and we're already working on it on the back end. But it was just that thing, like 10 minutes asking for help, saved me probably 10 hours of effort plus having to frame it out and explain what I wanted. So I just think, to your point, like, ask for help. And also being in a group does help you be accountable. Now, you specifically shared with me in your pitch that overcoming rejection mindset and those blocks through community and community support and gamifying really helped for you. Could you share a bit about that? Because I know you had a lot of rejection in the beginning. Nothing personal, but you've gone through the fire.
This is part and parcel of entering the pitching game. You're going to get rejected. It's not personal. But I love, just to your point about asking for help. I love that. And I think that, I just want to speak on that quickly. Like, the fact that we can just approach anyone is something I think we should take advantage of in a respectful way. And so I know I posted on LinkedIn earlier this year about asking my clients for advice on raising my rates, and they gave me suggestions that was really helpful in terms of new offers and stuff. And I wrote a LinkedIn post, and someone asked me, and I told her kind of how I approached this because she was wondering if she could do something similar with their clients. And I think we kind of forget that we can just message people about these things, but a lot of the time people are open, especially if it's something very specific to something you've shared. But yeah, so onto rejections. Well, if you enter the freelance journalism space, you're going to get rejected. That's kind of the first piece of advice I got, and it's the first piece of advice I tell people, and it's, if you want to make it, if you want to get published, you need to change your relationship with rejections, because rejections suck. But I know when I first started pitching myself, I was quite emotionally attached to the outcome of the pitch. And so I would, find this perfect publication and have this perfect idea. And I envisioned it in this publication. I envisioned my byline and the logos of the publication and the story being executed. I envisioned myself sharing it. And that's all really great in terms of being inspired to create something. But when the rejection came in, I took that as a personal offense. That was like, oh my gosh, I'm not wanted by this place that I thought I was perfect for. It's, going on a really promising date with someone and all your values align and they make you laugh and you get vulnerable and they get vulnerable and then they ghost you. It's like, I just thought there was potential here. And I think changing your relationship with that is that there are so many reasons why you're getting rejected that have nothing to do with you. And it's the same with dating, right? That person is maybe not emotionally available right now because they just came out of a breakup, or there is a lack of value alignment, and that's not something you can control. And the same with pitching publications is that editors may have only budget to assign stories on, the bank crisis right now, or whatever. They may be like, okay, we have budget for 5 more stories, and 2 of them need to be personal finance related and 3 need to be this related, or there are a myriad of reasons why an editor is rejecting you. maybe your pitch isn't great, and that's like room to improve the pitch. But it's not personal. And the only way where I could really commit to actually getting my bylines and big publications was to almost depersonalize the pitch process. And that came through setting rejection goals. And I give credit to a Facebook group, which is it's like a secret network of Facebook groups that you can't disclose publicly, but it's for women writers, women and non-binary writers. So you can message me if you want to join them. But yeah, anyway, they had a Facebook group called something full of rejects. And in that Facebook group, people would set rejection goals. And there was an article about like the power of setting 100 rejection goals. And I remember seeing journalists with like 15 years more experience than me being like, I'm so excited I just got rejected from the Paris Review, or I'm so excited I just got this rejection from the Huffington Post or Al Jazeera or something. And I think that really encouraged me, because I was like, wow, like this is normal. It was like these successful journalists who've been in this field for decades are still getting rejected, and they're kind of talking about it and sharing it. So I think in that way, community was everything to kind of help me depersonalize it. Because I was like, oh, it's not just me. This is normal. This is kind of part and parcel. And I remember also like seasoned journalists being like, how to break into a big publication, and it was like just persistently pitch them. Like when someone rejects you, that's a door left half open. That means they're welcoming you to pitch them again. And yes, I set my rejection goals, and I think I got like 67 rejections the first time, and I got some of my first bylines. And then the following year, I got into the Huffington Post and Vice, and I think the following year was Refinery 29. And at this point, I'd kind of diversified my income stream. So journalism wasn't the only thing I was doing, but it was still like, you know, as a copywriter, I want the big bylines. And I love journalism. It's just not very stable. And then as I transitioned to publicity, I kind of applied a similar logic to other forms of pitching, like podcasting, is that there are so many uncontrollable variables, and also like value alignment is another uncontrollable variable. You can't always predict whether your values perfectly align with the host, and you just kind of have to depersonalize that process and kind of look at it as like a step forward. I'm putting myself out there, and that's a good thing. Yeah, so I guess that's kind of my story.
Well, you pointed out a couple really great things about that. Is you had your rejection goals, which meant that you're still pitching regardless of outcome. You're not taking it. It's not like, oh, they hate me. It's just like, I'm not a fit yet, right? You may be sometime, you may not be, given things that are not in your control. I will say when we get pitched, the things that annoy me, and I mean, I don't make the final decisions anymore on our podcast guests. Summer and I, my online business manager, and I are in alignment. She knows what fits, because as a team, we've decided our editorial, quote unquote, content for the year. We haven't created it, but we have a theme or a focus, right? It's not personal if you're not in the focus. You know, it's just like, we're not going there right now. But when people keep going, did you see my last email? We're waiting on a reply. I'm thinking, do you think you're the only person in my life asking us for a response? And by the way, I have paying clients who really want help. So I'm going, okay, I know it's important to you, but you're not the only person on the planet pitching us. So give me a tip on how you help your clients who are trying to learn to pitch, how to approach, some actionable steps about pitching either someone else or themselves on a podcast. What are some actionable approaches that you find work?
That's a great question. I think the first thing is you want to be pitching the right places, right? So what I think is an easy way to kind of get started to finding those places is look at people who speak to your target audience but have, I always say like 2 or 3 or 4 steps ahead of you. So if you are kind of been in business for 1 year and you have like 800 LinkedIn followers, maybe you want to look at someone who has been in business for longer and has maybe like 5 times your platform. You don't want to look at someone with a huge platform because that's not going to be easy to replicate. And then put their name into Apple Podcasts and you will see the places they have been on. And that kind of gets you a good idea of the types of shows that, one, take guests in your zone, and two, that actually take guests and then speak to your target audience. I think that's kind of the first step towards finding
research,
and also pitch the shows you listen to, because you know those shows. The same with pitching publications. Pitch the publications you read because you know them, you know their voice, you know what they want. And then, what other tips would I give here?
Well, let's dig into that for just a second. You know them, right? You know them because you're part of their community, right? Whether they know you are or not, right? You're listening to them, you're reading them. So you've already invested in them at some level. You know them, right? That's a big deal. And I think it's becoming more and more a big deal anymore, Alice, because it's like, why would I invest in you when it's so transactional? It's not a relationship. It's nothing that I'm sure you want to benefit the people I'm trying to support. It's just all about you. So I think those 2 points are really important, right? Do your research, but invest some time in learning about them. Or like you said, go to what you listen to and are familiar with, because you can speak to that audience. And I think we forget, it's like, well, this is a fit because we think, whoever our current audiences think it's important, you should hear about it. And honestly, there's people who are going, doesn't matter to me. Not that they don't like it, it just doesn't resonate, And by the way, do you even know? And that's, that's not just specific to podcasts. I think about that. That's one of the biggest gripes in fundraising, is the funders, the foundations say, people send us applications. They don't look at what our mission is, who we funded in the past, what our, it's like they have no interest in us and our goals. It's all about, I need money. You're our savior. And I'm making that a little more cut and dry than it is. But I mean, it's really thinking, are you thinking about you? Are you thinking about benefiting the person you're pitching and their people, whoever those are? Would you agree with that?
Oh my gosh, 100%. And I think the shared goals is such a great one, because that's ultimately what you want to get through in a pitch, is that whatever their mission is, whatever their goal is, you're providing value to that. And that's why I kind of always say, like, your story and your value-oriented speaking points are what you need to get through in a pitch, not your credibility. Like pitching someone like, oh, I am, two times TEDx talker and I wrote a book and I did this, and can I come speak on your show? Is not, I don't know, I just don't imagine it's going to hook a podcast host's attention in the same way that, like,
footnote. Oh, and by the way, right, it was like, tell me how you are going to help the people who listen to us. And if you don't know who those people are, you haven't done you're not paying attention.
Absolutely. I have like a little pitch guide on my website. It's called @hustlingwriter/podcast pitch template, but it has points, and that's, I say, add your credibility, but that's at the end of your pitch. That's your bio. It's like, by the way, like, this is me, I worked for 15 years in like HR or whatever, and I've been featured in these magazines. But that's not what you lead a pitch with, and that's not what catches someone's attention. And it's rarely that you're digging into something that is addressing a pain point or, like advancing a shared goal or solving a problem for the podcast host audience. And so that I kind of say you can open up with like an agitating question or a shocking narrative, like if you're pitching a podcast that addresses like workplace problems and you open up with a narrative about how you got fired from work for addressing a sexual harassment case, you reported sexual harassment in HR and 2 weeks later you're informed that you were fired. That's a shocking narrative and that's a relevant narrative. And then that alludes to the important topics that are going to follow. And then I would say have value-based speaking points of like how listeners can address this if they experience something like this. What are the next steps? How do you I don't know, whatever, you don't have to speak to everything because I think very specific pitches are better than trying to address every problem out there. But I guess you're talking about kind of repivoting back into the workplace following this, or how leaders can address this, or whatever it is, but have specific speaking points that cover that topic. But I think just pitching your credibility is not going to cut it. And I like to kind of have, personalize it, show them that you know their show, then lead with kind of narrative or an agitating question that speaks to a shared goal or a pain point, and then have your speaking points succinctly kind of covering the value you're going to be sharing with their audience, and then have a bio and then a call to action.
Well, and the other thing you did really well was follow directions.
Yeah.
Because I did, I just immediately, I forwarded that on to Summer. I said, I'm leaning towards yes, because there was something, I did not know you. I did not know you before this, right? We weren't connected on any networks. And I said, there's something about Alice that is just kind of ringing true for me. And I'm leaning yes, I will defer to you, because Summer is my rational mind too. She'll go, it doesn't fit with anything we're doing. Could we do it in the future, right?
Yeah.
But towards that end, though, I said, but here's what would be helpful, right? So she wrote back to you and you said, absolutely, we can do that. I mean, it was more relational, but I wanted more. I wanted that plus this interview we're doing today. And I thought that your approach was easy. And like I said, you followed our instructions, because we have an onboarding process and you got it done fast. And I thought, okay, that's someone who's going to follow through on her word and deliver. Because I've had people who push and then crickets. It's like, okay, thanks for making us jump, so we don't jump so fast anymore.
Yeah.
You learn that over time.
Yeah.
Would your approaches here that you shared with pitching a podcast, how closely aligned are those to pitching print?
Oh my gosh, I love this. I had a conversation with Leslie Seymour on her podcast, Reinvent Yourself, and she is an ex-magazine editor, and she worked like Marie Claire and More Magazine. And as she kind of asked me to go through the pitching process, she was like, oh, so it's literally the same as pitching magazines then, it's just podcasts. And I was like, yeah, pretty much. So with magazines, different magazines have different styles. So I think that's definitely something you have to take into consideration. And similar with podcasts, if it's like a very serious businessy podcast, you're not going to be like, hey girl, how's it going? But if you're pitching like a kind of more casual, like gossipy podcast, that's absolutely the tone you would have. You want to show the podcast host that you speak to their audience.
You're not tone deaf.
Yeah. So I think that there's that more. I'd say it's more pronounced in publications, and maybe it's because I kind of end up pitching a lot of similar podcasts, and a lot of my clients pitch similar podcasts. The tone doesn't vary too much. Whereas in publications, it does a lot. If you're pitching a personal essay, you're obviously making it quite personal. And if you're pitching, the New York Times or Harvard Business Review, it's very factual. You're coming on with a strong thesis, one big idea, lots of research, lots of hyperlinks, and you're not kind of coming in with a more casual space. So I'd say that's a big difference. But other than that, with publications, you want to hook them in with a sort of shocking scene or a bold idea, or something that hasn't been said before, and that's kind of your intro graph, the thing that's going to capture the editor's attention. And as we know, like time is our biggest commodity, and editors get pitched all the time. The more competitive the magazine, the more pitches they get. And so they're not going to read your whole pitch if you don't capture their attention in that opening line. And then where a podcast pitch, you have speaking points, and the publication, you would kind of give them, or for print or for online, you would give them a kind of short paragraph explaining your reporting plan. So if you're, say like, I envision a research-led feature where I speak to C-suite leaders and a psychologist, I can bring on board a photographer and I can turn this around in 2 weeks. They kind of get an idea, or I will speak to these 3 points. You kind of give them, because you haven't written the whole article, of course, but you kind of give them, like, I'm going to talk about, like, and explain in further detail what this is and how it manifests, and like how C-suite leaders can address this. This is some topic that we don't know, which is me.
What's really clear to me, though, is if I'm starting out and I want to understand the nuances of pitching, print or podcast, I actually think you're my gal, because for 2 reasons. One, your knowledge, which is great. I mean, so that's an interesting thing for me. Part of it's your knowledge, but the other part is relational. It's your accessibility. So I could say, okay, I don't get it, or I'm struggling here, and or what is my block here? Like, and because you're going to identify, is it a rejection block? Like, just put it out there. This is solid for now, right? You've done what is needed. You're respectful of the recipient who's going to be figuring this out. So I just want to ask you to talk about what you said. You've got that on your website about pitching yourself, right? Can you describe a little bit more about that? Because we'll make sure that's in the show notes. Yeah,
sure. I have a training so I have a guide for you to use as you please for free, and that's at my website, hustlingwriters/podcast-pitch-template, and it'll be in the show notes. And that's got the template that I use to pitch podcasts. And it's, of course, you have to write your own pitch and your own story and everything, but it has the layout. And then the 5 tips, such as, like, how to make it timely, how to personalize it, how to develop a unique story idea, how to, outline your credibility. And then for anyone who's looking for help with pitching, I have a training that teaches you how to pitch yourself to podcasts. And that's 4 to 6 weeks, say like 3 hours. And it comes with a 60-minute story development call with me and 2 rounds of edits to get those templates interesting. And that's called Pitch Your Power. So it's hustlingwriters/Pitch Your Power. So that's how I can help if anyone wants help with pitching or setting rejection goals. You can email me about that. But yeah.
Well, I think, it's like as you talked about those goals, I'm going, there's so many areas in life where we pause because we don't want to hear no. And based on our own personality types, I think some people are more impervious to the no. They don't mind getting it. It still is not, they're not going, oh, that felt so great, But it's like, okay, next. And there's some people who are just going, oh my God, that's like a dagger to my heart, right? So I think our personalities and how we're wired influences it, and understanding, like you're thinking about that, Alice, is helpful. But it also applies in a lot of other places, like, what if you don't get the job you asked for? Okay.
Oh my gosh, yes.
But you were out in the field putting yourself out there, right? Pitching yourself, putting yourself out, so I think the wisdom that you've shared today has applications in other areas of our life if we look for it, One of the ways I cope with a no is I think, oh, they think not yet. Okay. I just put a T and a YET after. It's like, they said no. Oh, they meant to say not yet. I'll be back. Thank you very much. Or I'll
and
find
you
the
should
person.
be back.
Well, yeah,
Yes, you should be. I remember when I was still freelancing as a copywriter, and I applied for a copywriting role, and they, responded with a very thoughtful rejection, and then they said check in, and so I did check in, and she said no, not yet, and then she emailed me like a month later and said we have an opening. Do you want it? And the only reason she emailed me and said we have an opening, do you want it, is because I checked in. I was top of mind. And so that was literally a not yet. If I took it as, oh no, she doesn't want me, she wouldn't have thought of me when she did have an opening. So I think it applies to everything. Yeah. Yeah.
People say check back. They might just be blowing you off, but what if they're not, And
Exactly.
so people, well, how do you know? I'm going, who cares? I'm checking back. So they're going to blow me off. It's no skin off my nose. It's a call.
They blow you off again. Yeah, that's fine.
I know.
Took you 2 minutes.
But, I'm able to say that now because, like you said, you've weathered your rejections and you can depersonalize them, right? It's not always about you. Sometimes it is. Honestly, some people just go, I don't like that person. Okay.
Yeah. That's lack of value alignment. You don't want to force a relationship that wasn't supposed to be.
You pay for those.
Yeah. Exactly.
And not in a good way. Alice, you just cracked me up. I so enjoyed talking with you. Okay, I want to ask you one last question. What should I have asked you, or do you wished I would have asked you today in this interview that I did not, and you want to answer?
Ooh, that's a good question. Should have prepared for this.
You couldn't have, because I just thought of it. How would you prepare for something you didn't know was going to happen?
There's definitely something. It's when you're just completely overthinking and you're like, what is a smart question to ask? I think really just, I know, if you are getting rejected repeatedly and you feel like you're kind of putting yourself out there and nothing is happening, and maybe you've been pitching yourself for a few months and you've invested a lot of hours, do you keep moving, or do you take this as a sign to do something differently? And I would say take it as a sign to try new things. So as much as setting rejection goals are great, put yourself out there, you also want to look at the data, and if the data says that something's not working, then maybe there's a chance to change your strategy. And ways to do that could be actually reaching out to some people who have rejected you and ask if they have any feedback on your pitch. Other ways could be, asking if you know anyone else pitching themselves, if they could send who have successfully pitched themselves, to send examples of their pitches, or doing some research. But I think set rejection goals and then also use the data to improve strategy. And when things work, look at them and be like, what worked here? And what can I replicate in my future pitches?
Be curious.
Yeah. Be curious. Yes, I love that.
And can I add one more thing? Because you've mentioned it helping you and I mentioned it helping me. And that is, if you've learned something and someone reaches out to you, take 10 or 15 minutes and say, hey, let me just share this with you. DM me, directly, and I'll be happy. Sometimes it's like, just if you're willing to make the effort to DM, I'm willing to share. If you're not, oh well,
Oh well, you try.
Oh, well. But
Exactly.
But you never know how your little help, or like you're saying, show what worked, right?
Yeah.
And be vulnerable about it. Like, I'm pitching like this, or if you're in a group like you were in for writing, it's like, that's a safe place to get some guidance.
Exactly. Yeah. Find those community groups. Whether it's entrepreneurs, writers are great people to hang out with if you're pitching yourself. And ask for advice, ask for feedback, because you will get good feedback. I always have.
You've got to extend yourself. That's the main thing.
Yeah.
People don't just come and say, I intuited that you have a question. It's like, you've got to go for it. Alice, I want to thank you so much for being a podcast guest again, this time solo guest. And thanks for doing that with our community from Cape Town. And I'm going to say goodbye right now.
Thank you so so much. It was so great chatting to you, Sarah. Thank you for inviting me back twice. Such an honor. I really enjoyed this.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the No Labels, No Limits podcast with best-selling author, change agent, and strategic vision coach, Sarah Box. You can grab the show notes and find out how to work with Sarah at sarahbox.com/No Labels, No Limits podcast. We'd love this podcast to reach as many people as possible. So please remember to rate, leave a 5-star review, and share the podcast with someone you think would get value from this conversation. Until next time, keep taking those daily action steps to align your purpose to your principles and achieve your goals in business and life.